It was the kind of story you wouldn't believe unless you saw it with your own eyes. An elderly woman, small in stature but strong in heart, opened her home to a group of rough-looking bikers in the middle of a deadly snowstorm. By the next morning, the sound of engines thundered down her quiet street, 100 motorcycles lined up outside her door. Who she was and what happened that night changed not only her life but the lives of those riders forever. Her name was Martha Lewis. At 72, Martha was the type of woman everyone in her small Midwest town recognized. She lived alone in an old farmhouse just outside of town, a place filled with memories of her late husband and the children who now lived far away. Martha was known for her warm smile, her apple pies, and the way she always had time to check in on neighbors. She was steady and kind, the sort of woman who didn't hesitate to help someone in need, no matter who they were. The storm hit fast that evening. Heavy snow piled against the windows, and the wind howled through the trees like a chorus of voices. Martha had been preparing for the weather all day, stacking firewood by the door and making a big pot of stew to keep herself warm. She was settling into her rocking chair with a blanket across her knees when the distant roar of engines shattered the night stillness. At first, she thought she was imagining it. Who would be out on motorcycles in a storm like this? But the sound grew louder until headlights cut through the white curtain of falling snow. One bike after another crawled up her long driveway, their riders bundled in heavy jackets and helmets iced over. Martha's heart skipped. She knew their look: patched jackets, tattoos, the kind of men people in town crossed the street to avoid. They were Hell's Angels. 15 of them in total, their bikes parked in a crooked line, exhaust fumes steaming into the frozen air. The leader, a tall man with a beard that reached his chest, knocked on her door with a gloved fist. Martha hesitated, her hand hovering above the doorknob. Every instinct told her this could be dangerous. But another voice, the one that had guided her through decades of faith and compassion, whispered otherwise. She opened the door. The man's voice was deep, gravelly from years of cigarettes. "Ma'am, sorry to bother you. Roads are closed. We can't see a thing out there. Any chance we could just wait out the storm in your barn? We'll be gone by morning." Martha glanced past him at the others, their eyes squinting against the wind, faces red from cold. They looked rough, but underneath the leather and patches she saw what she always looked for first: human beings. Human beings who were cold, stranded, and needed shelter. She stepped aside without a word and gestured for them to come in. The men exchanged surprised glances. They clearly hadn't expected that kind of response. Slowly, they filed inside, stomping snow from their boots, their massive frames almost filling up her little front room. Martha noticed the way they looked around, trying to be careful not to knock over her family photos or the delicate glass lamp on the side table. Despite their intimidating appearance, there was a politeness in their movements, as if they didn't want to scare her. She pointed to the hooks by the door. "You can hang your jackets there. Boots on the mat. And don't just stand there, you'll catch pneumonia. Come warm yourselves by the fire." The leader gave her a small nod. "Thank you, ma'am. We'll stay out of your way." It was awkward at first. 15 bikers crammed into her cozy living room, sitting on the couch, chairs, even the rug near the fire. Martha went to the kitchen and returned with bowls of steaming stew. She handed them out one by one, refusing to take no for an answer. They accepted, some mumbling thanks, others just digging in like they hadn't eaten all day. As the minutes passed, the storm outside worsened, rattling the windows and burying the world in white. Inside, though, the atmosphere began to shift. The bikers started loosening up, taking off gloves and helmets, revealing faces lined with years of hard living. Martha noticed one man gently rubbing his hands together, his knuckles scarred, tattoos fading with age. Another kept glancing at the family photos on her mantle, her wedding picture, her kids as teenagers, grandkids playing in the yard. Martha decided to break the silence. "So, what brings you all out here in this kind of weather?" Surely not just a joyride. A younger rider chuckled. We were headed to a charity event in the next state. Didn't count on the storm turning this bad. Another added, we tried stopping in town, but people looked at us like we were criminals. Doors locked before we even got off our bikes. Martha nodded knowingly. People can be quick to judge. But everyone deserves a little warmth when the world outside is this cold. The leader studied her carefully. He was used to suspicion, to people seeing the jacket on his back before the person inside it. Yet here was this tiny woman, offering him stew and a place by her fire without a hint of fear. Most folks wouldn't have let us pass the porch, he admitted. Martha smiled gently. Maybe most folks haven't lived long enough to learn that kindness goes further than suspicion. For hours, the house buzzed with unlikely conversation. The men shared stories of their rides, the open highways, and the sense of brotherhood that kept them together. Martha listened, fascinated, asking questions the way only someone genuinely interested would. She told them about her late husband, who had served in the army, and how she missed the sound of his boots by the door. Some of the men nodded with understanding. They, too, knew what it was like to lose people along the way. As night deepened, Martha brought out blankets and pillows. Some of the men offered to sleep in the barn, but she wouldn't hear of it. Too cold out there, she insisted. You'll sleep where it's warm. Don't argue with me, I've raised 3 children, and I know how to win a debate. They laughed, and for the first time that night, Martha felt the tension melt completely. Her home, once quiet and lonely, was now alive with the sound of heavy boots shifting on the floorboards, muffled laughter, and the occasional clatter of a spoon against a bowl. It reminded her of the old days when her children were still at home, filling the place with noise and chaos. She realized, oddly enough, that she liked the company. The storm raged on, but inside the farmhouse there was warmth, safety, and the kind of unexpected bond that forms only when strangers choose to trust one another. What Martha didn't know was that her small act of kindness that night was about to ripple far beyond her living room. The next morning would bring something she never imagined, something that would turn her quiet life upside down. The storm finally eased by dawn. A pale gray light spilled across the snow-draped fields as Martha stirred from sleep. She had dozed off in her rocking chair, the fire still glowing faintly in the hearth. Around her, the bikers were scattered across the room, wrapped in blankets, their breath steady and deep. For a moment, she simply watched them. There was something strangely peaceful about seeing these rough men resting so vulnerably in her home, like weary travelers who had finally found safe harbor. She rose quietly, careful not to wake them, and began preparing breakfast. Bacon sizzled in the pan, and the smell slowly spread through the house. One by one, the men woke, blinking groggily, stretching sore muscles. A few rubbed their eyes in disbelief, as if still processing the fact that they'd spent the night in a stranger's farmhouse. You didn't have to do all this, ma'am, one said, pulling on his boots. Martha waved him off. You can call me Martha. And I don't cook for thanks, I cook because no one should face the day on an empty stomach. Sit down. Eat. Plates piled high with eggs, biscuits, and bacon soon filled the table. The bikers dug in heartily, and the sound of forks clinking against plates filled the air. Between bites, they offered to help shovel her driveway, chop wood, or fix anything in the house that needed attention. Martha smiled but shook her head. You've already given me what I needed most, company. The leader, who had said little during the night, finally spoke as he set his plate aside. Martha, you treated us like family when you didn't have to. Most of the world wants nothing to do with us. They don't see the people behind the jackets. But you did. He paused, his voice thickening slightly. We won't forget that. After breakfast, the men began preparing to leave. They stepped outside into the biting cold, brushing snow off their bikes, tightening straps, and revving engines. Martha stood on the porch, pulling her shawl tight around her shoulders. She waved as they rode off one by one, their tires crunching through the snow. The last to leave was the leader. He pulled his bike up close to her porch, lifted his helmet, and looked her in the eyes. "You'll see us again, Martha," he said with a faint smile. "Count on it." And with that, he roared down the road, disappearing into the white landscape. Martha went back inside, the silence settling once more around her. The house suddenly felt too big again, too quiet. She went about her day, sweeping floors, folding blankets, and tidying up. Yet she couldn't stop thinking about those men, the way they had laughed at her jokes, the way they had softened under her care. She wondered if she'd ever truly see them again or if they would just be a memory, another story she would tell her grandchildren one day. The next morning, however, Martha received her answer. It started with a faint rumble, distant at first, like thunder rolling in. She looked out the window, and her breath caught in her throat. Down the road, stretching as far as she could see, came motorcycle after motorcycle, dozens of them, their headlights cutting through the morning mist. The sound grew louder until it shook the air, a chorus of engines that seemed to make the earth tremble. Martha stepped onto her porch, eyes wide, her hands clutching her shawl. 100 bikes, lined up neatly in front of her farmhouse. Men and women climbed off, pulling off helmets, some with beards and leather jackets, others younger with fresh tattoos and wide eyes. It was a sight both intimidating and awe-inspiring, like a small army had arrived at her door. Neighbors peeked from their windows down the road, whispering and pointing, unsure whether to call the police or simply watch. The leader from the night before walked up the porch steps with a grin. "Told you we'd be back." Martha's voice trembled, though not from fear. "My word, what on earth is all this?" He gestured to the line of riders behind him. "These are our brothers and sisters. When we told them about what you did for us last night, about how you opened your home without a second thought, they wanted to meet the woman who reminded us what real kindness looks like." Martha's eyes welled up. She looked out at the sea of leather and chrome, at the men and women who had come not to take but to give, to honor a simple act of hospitality. She pressed a hand to her chest. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," the leader replied. "We just wanted you to know you're not alone. You ever need anything, anything at all, you've got a family bigger than you can imagine." The bikers cheered, some raising fists, others revving their engines in salute. Martha couldn't help but laugh, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like just an old widow living in a quiet farmhouse. She felt alive, connected, part of something larger than herself. That day, the riders didn't just line up and leave. They shoveled her driveway, stacked firewood higher than her porch railing, and fixed the broken hinge on her barn door. Some sat with her on the porch, listening to her stories, while others played with the stray cat that often wandered her yard. Martha moved among them with a pot of coffee in one hand and a plate of cookies in the other, her laughter mingling with the roar of engines and the chatter of voices. By evening, as the sun dipped low and the bikers prepared to leave, Martha realized something had changed. She wasn't just a woman who had given shelter in a storm. She was a friend, a grandmotherly figure, and in some ways, a symbol of what kindness could do. Even in the most unlikely of circumstances. As the last bike disappeared into the horizon, Martha stood on her porch again, the sound of engines fading into silence. But this time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt full of promise, full of connection, full of the knowledge that she would never again be forgotten in her little farmhouse by the road. And from that day forward, whenever the townspeople whispered about the old lady on the edge of town, they spoke with a mixture of awe and respect. Because everyone knew, she was the woman who sheltered 15 Hell's Angels in a snowstorm, and in return, gained the loyalty of an entire brotherhood.